Hi everybody, here we are in week 6. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving and that having a break week last week was helpful to just kind of recharge and reset. Hopefully you guys are making more progress than I am. As you can see, I'm still working to get caught up on all of your grading. Some of you are working to get caught up on assignments. That's awesome. For those of you who've stuck with me the whole time, you definitely get the prize. So thank you for doing that as well. Hopefully the break was restful and you're ready to jump back in. As I had hinted at several times, the pace is going to pick up here quite a bit as we move into finals and the final few weeks of the class. So in putting together kind of the sequence of topics for this class, I was thinking about what I want you to have in your toolbox and in your arsenal going into finals in your other courses. So as you know, there's no final exam in this class, but I know that you're probably doing them in some of your other classes, and I wanted to give you some things that hopefully would be useful to you. So a couple different topics this week that have to do with that. The first little subset is grit and growth mindset. This is a topic that people have kind of, you either love it or you hate it. For some people, they had it, I've been told, in high school, and it's kind of been beaten to death a little bit, and they are kind of over it. Other people find it really intriguing and revolutionary and interesting and haven't been exposed to it before. We do find it to be of really strong value in FYE. There is a lot of research that correlates a growth mindset with a likelihood to persist and finish in college, and actually even with a higher GPA. Growth mindset is something that is tied to better academic achievement. So it does have a very direct bearing on your work here and your goals and your academics. So that's kind of our first piece. All it is 2 discussions. There's no reflection or anything. I'm going to let you click through and kind of read what they are. They each have a TED Talk, but the TED Talks are very short. One is 10 minutes and one is, I believe, 7 minutes. This just gives you an overview of what growth mindset means, if that's a new concept for you. And then there's a TED Talk and some questions, and the same thing is true with discussion 2. So again, I'm going to remind you, as usual, to please pay attention to both deadlines. As always, the initial posting deadline is on Saturday, which I believe is the 5th, and your responding to others deadline is Monday the 7th. So those are your 2 things to kind of get into that module. I'm excited to talk to you guys all about this. This is a passion of mine. It was actually part of my master's thesis, had to do with growth mindset, something that I believe in very strongly. And I was also very excited about how well you all took part in the time management discussion and how involved you were. So I'm excited to see what you bring to this one as well. The second piece that I want you to really have in your arsenal going into finals is some practical how to study, how to get the most out of your learning kinds of strategies. And that's what the second piece is for, that has to do with active learning and memory. So I have students come to me a lot in my job at LRCC, which is a combination of like what the advising center does and then what CAPS does. And sometimes they'll come to me for the CAPS piece, the academic help, and they'll say to me, I read the chapter a bunch of times and I still failed the test. Like, I read it. I really did. I promise. I read it a lot of times, and they think I don't believe them. And I do believe them. And I'll say to them, well, how did you read it? And they'll say to me, well, how many ways are there to do that? So my goal with this module and these strategies is to not necessarily have you work harder, but to have you work smarter, to have you learn strategies to maximize the time that you're investing in reading chapters. And the way to do that is to engage with the material that you're reading or that you're studying, that you're taking notes on, that you're listening to, whatever the case might be. So a couple little examples I want to give about this. I don't like to use the word lecture. That's too dry and it implies that I'm going to keep you here for an hour, which I'm not. But I do want to give you a few sort of things to think about on this topic and some information for you. And since I don't want you to have to stare at the Canvas page the whole time, I'm going to give you something much cuter to stare at. So this is Georgia. And she is, as you can see, relaxed but awake. And that's what I hope that you are as I talk about this a little bit. So you can look at her cute little face, but please listen to me and please try to stay awake. So one of the best ways, and this is not rocket science, and you probably know this if you think about it, one of the best ways to retain what you're learning is to make it somehow personally meaningful to you. If you ask your parents or maybe your grandparents, depending on how old you are, where they were when they heard that Kennedy was shot, they can almost always tell you details, what they were wearing, who they were with, where they were, where they were sitting or standing, and what the room looked like, and all those kind of things. And that's because that memory has a very strong emotional reaction attached to it. Okay, for my generation, I'm in my late 30s. For us, it was 9/11. So some of you may not have been alive then, or you may be too young to remember. But for my generation, we were in our late teens, early 20s, the age that some of you are now, when September 11th happened. And we can remember, same thing, what we were wearing, what the room looked like, exactly what we were doing in the moment that we got that news. Now, hopefully, we're not going to do anything to you that will elicit that kind of horrible negative emotion or that kind of trauma or anything like that. But the point remains that you have a more imprinted memory of something and can recall it more readily when there's some kind of emotion or some kind of meaning attached to it. Two other examples I have that have a little bit more direct, bearing on learning. A couple studies I wanted to tell you about very briefly, and they're just very paraphrased. In one of them, researchers asked participants to recall lists of words. And in one group, they asked them to recall the words based on whether or not the words contained the letter E. So they gave them a list of words, and they were supposed to remember all the ones with the letter E in them. And then in the other group, they were supposed to associate something with the words, associate it with either something they enjoyed or something they didn't enjoy, a pleasant memory of some kind. So the words were words like dance, and dance obviously contains the letter E, but dancing is also something that some people find joy in, or maybe have a memory attached to. And so they were able to differentiate between those two groups based on how they were asked to recall the word dance. And there was a significant difference in the ability of the group to recall the word where they had been asked to associate it with some kind of personal meaning or emotion. The other one that I thought was interesting had to do with a young man who set a world record. It's since been broken, but I forget what his record was, 90 some digits, I think, of remembering a series of numbers when they were read to him at 1 digit per second. Now, why this would be your goal in life, I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun to me, but this was a goal that he set for himself to break this record, and he did. And one of the things that he figured out is that if he associated the numbers with something else, he could recall them more easily. So he used the same strategies that we all use to remember numbers, like chunking, for example, right? When you do a phone number, you don't just rattle off all 7 digits. There's like a rhythm to it, right? The area code is 3 numbers, then 3 more numbers, then 4 numbers. So that helped for a while, but then he figured out that in order to remember even more, he would associate them with some kind of meaning. So this young man also happened to be a track star. He was a star athlete, very successful runner. So when he heard the digits, for example, 907, he would associate that in his mind with a really good time for a 2-mile race. 9 minutes and 7 seconds. So at that point, it ceases to become random and it starts to become meaningful. So I would just kind of encourage you to take from those examples what you can. Sometimes you're going to learn and recall information that might not be the most exciting thing you've ever learned in your life, or you might not see as having direct relevance to kind of where you want to be or where you want to go. And it's just a step to get there. But one way to increase that is to intentionally make meaning. Sometimes it's not obvious what those connections are, right? If you're taking a class that's outside your major or outside your interests, but if you intentionally create those connections, you're going to have an easier time recalling that information. So let me just show you a couple of the things. We'll take little Gigi away, her little face. Hopefully you're still awake as well. So let me show you a couple things that I've given you here. I've given you a couple different readings. They're both very short. This one is from a textbook, like part of a chapter that has to do with very concrete memory strategies. And this one is from a handout that I have made that I've put together from different sources, kind of synthesized for you. And then there's a study skills and memory strategies quiz, which is open book, and it's based on these two readings. And I think I even tell you in the quiz which one is from the textbook chapter and which one is from the handout. So it's not it's not too strenuous. And then I've given you some optional resources. This one is active reading strategies. So remember how I said I get from students, well, how many ways are there to read something? Well, really, there are a lot of ways to read something. And what your goal needs to be is, again, not working harder, but working smarter. And the way to do that is engaging with the material that you're reading. And this sheet will give you some strategies on how to do that if that's not something that you already do. One thing that I hear from students a lot about active reading is, won't it take longer? And, on the front end, yes, it will, because on the front end, you're going to be underlining things, paraphrasing things, looking up words that you don't know, trying to figure out how ideas relate to each other, brainstorming questions that the instructor might ask, all that kind of stuff. Where you get the payoff, I think, is at the end, because not only do you retain more, which means that you have to spend less time studying before the test, but you also, if you do have to take an exam or write a paper on what you're reading, you've already gone through and identified all of those things, which is kind of all of your footwork, right? And all of your prep work for having to do whatever your assignment is. So yes, it takes longer. But studies show that reading and reading and reading really doesn't have a good payoff when it comes to retaining information. You can read the same chapter 5 times, and if all you're doing is taking in all the words, that's really not an efficient use of your time and an effective strategy to get the most bang for your buck when it comes to reading material. So if you'd like to know more how to do that, there's some strategies there. I'm also happy to work with you to help you with that, even if it's in other classes. I definitely think that's something that I've had to work to perfect myself, so I'm happy to share that with you. The other optional resource that I've given you is a handout that I've made on rehearsal strategies. That might be an interesting way to refer to them, but I don't like the word study strategies, and this is why. When you talk about rehearsal implies being active. So in other contexts in your life that you rehearse, right, would be a play or athletics if you are practicing certain athletic skills, running drills, things like that. That's rehearsing. A musical instrument requires rehearsing. Those are all active, engaged activities, okay? So these give you very concrete, sort of straightforward ways that you can rehearse material. You can practice your material. And this all is more engaging than just reading it over and over and over again. So if you need some suggestions going into finals, keep in mind the biggest keys are to be active, to use the same information multiple times in different ways. That's how you practice, okay? Please don't practice by reading your notes over and over and over and over. That's not practicing. Practice it by engaging with it in different ways. Choose some of these ways. A note about flashcards. Don't put the word on one side and the definition on the other side. Put them on separate cards, and that way you can match them up, you can categorize them, you can put them in order, you can put them in groups, you can put them in all kinds of different, depending on what your topic is. It might be history events in chronological order, it could be parts of a cell, it could be all kinds of different things, but if you put them separately, it really opens up the possibilities of how you can work with them. So try to think that way when you're looking for ways to study. Okay, so again, this piece is optional. These are just tools I wanted you to have. It's up to you whether you use them or not. I just, I think it's part of my job to also equip you for things you're going to encounter in classes going forward. And that's what I'm trying to do. Believe it or not, this is really meant to be for your benefit and to make your life easier. So as far as what is due this week, you have 2 discussions. Neither one should be terribly time consuming. The TED Talks are very short. You have these 2 readings and an open book quiz. Then, though, and listed in a different spot, and please do not forget this, if we scroll way up to the top, we have the Career Exploration Project. These assignments that are due on the same day, on December 7th, have been up here for a while. So one is your project outline, and here are some details and the examples. This gives you the details of what I'm looking for and a partial example that I've done. This is a student example from last term that is really stellar. So definitely check that out. And then the other piece that is due is your references page, and this will be a document. So I know that you're making a slideshow, but for this piece of the assignment, you're going to do your references page as a document. So this is going to be the scholarly source that you found for last week's assignment, and then also 2 other ones. So you can find other sources if you want to. You can also use Career Coach or ONET or any of those other things that might interest you. Okay, so that's where you're going to submit this. And again, I have some examples for you. This is a handout with different kinds of references, how to format them, citation examples from the library. So everything that you should need is here. Okay, you just have to take the time to go through it and look at it carefully. But please don't let this sneak up on you. As I said, the project is going to move very quickly after this. So these have been up for a while. Please make sure you get these in by December 7th as well, even though they're in a different spot on the page. Make sure you don't forget them. Okay? So that's really it for this week. I am going to focus very heavily on getting those of you that I haven't gotten your approval on your source back to you. I'm going to make sure that I do that by the end of the weekend so that you know for sure that that's an acceptable source and you can use that. A couple of you have reached out to me having trouble finding a source, and I've been able to help you that way. So if you're stuck, don't just be stuck, okay? Reach out for help because I can help you. So that's it. I look forward to seeing what you're going to put on the discussion board, and I'm excited to kind of see the projects get moving and everything kind of get wrapped up here. So thanks for sticking with me, and again, this is posted a little bit early, I know, but that's not to, freak you out or pressure you. That's to actually give you extra time a little bit at the beginning of the week if you choose to start early. You do not have to start week 6 yet, but you can if you'd like to. So, all right, if you have any questions, please let me know, and I will talk to you again soon. Have a good week.